Now out on Blu-ray from Film Masters is a new restoration of two films that have seen a lot of video releases. And if you're a fan of 50s classic horror, sci-fi, monster, drive-in type movies like me, you've probably seen these movies a bunch of times. You've probably owned them in multiple formats and usually not very good quality. It is The Giant Gila Monster and The Killer Shrews from 1959. Now, this is really cool. Up front, I loved this edition. I'm really interested and excited about what Film Masters is doing, and I'm going to delve probably a lot farther into this than you would like for watching a video, but hey, what else do we have to do right now? So, Film Masters is this new company that is dedicated to doing definitive quality presentations of public domain titles, for the most part so far, public domain titles. And public domain, if you don't know, these are movies that are not copywritten. These are movies that either they failed to register their copyright when they came out, or they failed to renew their copyright, and they're not really owned by anyone. Dementia 13 is one of them. I could read you the whole list. I used to do a horror host show, Saturday Fright Special. Look it up if you care. It's still out there. And all we had to work with were public domain movies. So we ran both of these movies on our show in their day. And public domain means anybody can do anything they want with them. So anybody who could find any quality copy, print, video master, whatever, of these movies for the last many decades has just put them out. So these were the kind of movies that haunted the dollar bins and in your local dollar store on DVD. They usually didn't look very good. And they would be put out on videotape by Good Times or Star Maker or any of all those old budget videotape companies. And they would be $5 or $10 or whatever. And they usually didn't look very good. And they're run by horror hosts and they're run by TV station because nobody has to pay to do anything with these things. So the common wisdom in the video industry was, why would you put a lot of money into restoring a title that is proliferated in the market forever, and that technically, unless you do something special to it to alter it, anybody can take it and then release it as their own. You've put all that money into it for nothing. So most people wouldn't do that. Film Masters has the guts to do that, and it's really cool what they're doing. So let's just talk about what these movies are, if somehow you don't know. 1959, this was an actual double feature that played in drive-ins. I love that they put him to being a drive-in guy who works at a drive-in. I love that they are replicating the drive-in experience, at least in terms of putting the two movies together as they originally played. They were made originally to play together. They were advertised as double features. The posters had both things. The radio spots were for both things. They did play individually as well, but it was a package deal put together. And they're both pretty short too, which was the idea with drive-in movies, is they wouldn't be both 2.5-hour movies. They'd be, not a heck of a lot more than an hour, maybe an hour and a half, 80 minutes, something like that, which still I think is kind of the perfect length for most movies that most filmmakers and studios have forgotten. So first up, Giant Gila Monster. A bunch of hot rodding teens in Texas come up against a giant Gila monster, and what do? Who will survive what we left of them, and how do they stop it? You have Don Sullivan, who's this older than a teenager guy who loves his hot rod cars, loves his sister who has a disability, sings a nice song to her, Laugh Children Laugh, is going to be, hoping to get a music career, hoping to bust out of this small town where he was a grease monkey and a hot rodder and be something more than that. But wouldn't you know, this giant Gila monster thwarts his plans, and he has to work with the local police to help figure out what the problem is and stop it. Very simple movie. I think it's fun. Now, the only qualm I'm going to say I have with this set really at all is that some of the packaging and some of the extras kind of mock the movie, because it's common wisdom, because this was done by Mystery Science Theater, which I love, that it's a bad movie and it's a terrible movie and it's one of the worst movies. Well, if you think Giant Gila Monster is one of the worst films you've ever seen, I got some stuff to show you that's going to make that movie look like an Oscar winner. I think it's fun. I take these movies for what they are on their own terms. They were made to make money. They were made without a tremendous amount of high-mindedness, but they're fun and they work. And this is a 1959 movie that I still find entertaining. And what bad can I say about a movie that does its job? There's a lot of movies I saw within the last week that I found extremely not entertaining, that had a lot more resources than this film did. So Transfer looks beautiful. Transfer looks gorgeous on this. That's the thing about Film Masters, that they're trying. They're not just slapping these on video again to make an easy buck. It looks really good. Let me take a look at the package here and tell you what's inside. So you get this is cool too. Giant Gila Monster is presented in its theatrical 1:8:5 ratio and the TV format. So these were shot, a lot of films were shot what they call open matte or open aperture. They were shot square with the idea that for theaters they would be masked off on the top and the bottom. That's where you see boom mics on some older video transfers. If you see boom mics or lights or things that shouldn't be there, that's not bad filmmaking usually. That is a thing that was intended to be masked, and when they came out on videotape or DVD, they didn't bother to do that. So yeah, it looks great in both formats. I checked, and the 4:3 shows you more image on the top and the bottom of the screen, and the widescreen looks perfectly framed like it would have been in theaters. Also at the time, 1959, it's possible some theaters had not yet converted over to CinemaScope screens, might still have been 4:3 Academy 133 screens, and that shooting a film that way would give the operator, the projectionist, the ability to fill their screen and not have it look off or awkward or anything like that. You have the original 35mm restored trailer for the giant Gila monster. You have a commentary for the giant Gila monster by Larry Stroth, James Gunnis, Sean Sheridan, and Matt Weinhold from the Monster Party podcast. Now, it's a little mocking, which bugged me a little bit. It's a little wackier than I would love, but they do convey interesting information. Unfortunately, like I say, it takes that mocking tone, like this movie's terrible and people who made it were idiots, and boy, all the acting is bad, and boy, the logic in the movie is bad, and boy, that scene was bad. And after a while, I'm like, yeah, I don't. That's okay. I don't need that. But I did listen to the whole thing, and ultimately it was good. That tone kind of bugged me on occasion, but they did have some good information. There's some great information to be had throughout this package about the man who produced these films. More on that a little bit later. Archival interview with leading actor Don Sullivan by author Brian Sen. This is a long interview with Don Sullivan, who is the main guy in this film, recorded much more recently. And he talks about his life, his career, and a lot about this movie. And it's an audio interview, so it's illustrated with images. And it's really interesting. Sullivan, it was a guy who went on to be big in the hair care industry. He went into chemistry and developed products for like Redken and things like that, and looked back with humor about his attempt at being a movie star or a singer. Disc 2, these are on separate discs too, so again, the quality is allowed to be great. It's not like they packed all this stuff onto one disc. Disc 2, The Killer Shrews, once again presented in the 1:5 ratio or the TV format. You have Ray Kellogg and Unsung Master, a Ballyhoo Motion Pictures documentary written by C. Courtney Joyner, narrated by Larry Blameyer. This is really good. So, Killer Shrews. Let's actually talk about what this movie's about. Killer Shrews is about James Best, a.k.a. Roscoe P. Coltrane from Dukes of Hazzard, and he was in Hooper with Burt Reynolds, and he was in some really good Twilight Zone episodes pre-Dukes of Hazzard. This is pre-Dukes of Hazzard, if you don't know your timeline, and he plays a small ship's captain who winds up stuck on this little island that, wouldn't you know it, is overrun by giant mutated killer shrews, and it becomes a siege film. It's James Best and his ship's mate and the scientist and his daughter and another couple scientists in this shack that were sort of doing some experiments, and they mutated these shrews and they grew to a large size and they got released and they went off onto the island and they started multiplying and breeding, and they keep telling you they have to eat their body weight every 24 hours or every 48 hours or they will starve to death and die. So these shrews are hungry and they've run out of their food supply and they're looking for something to eat, which would be the people. So it's in a sense, it's like Night of the Living Dead before Night of the Living Dead, where everybody is stuck in this shack, this house, and they're trying to just stave off these shrews that are trying to get them. And the shrews start like clawing through walls, and they start trying to get in every little gap. And the shrews are a mixture of dogs with like masks and shag carpets on them. Not shag carpets, but they're tarted up dogs, and sometimes they're hand puppets. But let me give you a little story. Let me give you my personal connection to the Killer Shrews. When I was a kid growing up in New Hampshire, we got a lot of the Boston TV stations. We got the two that I love the most were Channel 38, WSBK TV Boston, and WLVI TV 56. They were independent stations. They showed a lot of movies. They showed an 8 o'clock movie every day. They showed movies in the afternoons, on the weekends, and they would show movies late at night. And one day when I was a kid, somehow I stayed up super late. My parents were asleep, and I was flipping channels, and I came across the Killer Shrews, and it scared the hell out of me. It worked 100% for me, because to me, in my kid brain, when the fantasy and reality gets a little bit blurry, my parents were asleep. They were like in the next room asleep. I was watching TV in the living room with only one light on, and the light of the TV was showing this black and white movie. And as far as I was concerned, I was alone in the world. My parents were right there. and these shrews were trying to get in. They were clawing through walls, and it was terrifying because I could sort of see that happening to myself on the second floor. It was totally impossible. It never would have happened, but it really worked for me as a kid. So I've always had a soft spot for this movie. So Ray Kellogg, that's all a way of saying Ray Kellogg plays one of the scientists. He's the guy who produced both of these movies on this disc. He was a Texas radio station owner. He kind of invented top 40 radio. He did a lot of interesting things. He was sort of a maverick, rich guy, entrepreneur, media mogul, and he decided, for fun, let's start up a studio and make a couple movies and see if we can make a buck with this monster stuff. And say what you will about the movies, somebody's talking about them right now. Somebody's releasing them still many, many decades later. He did something right. So that's a very, very cool extra. You get a collection of original radio spots for each film, which are great, courtesy of Gary L. Praj. And they're great because they're really well written and they're really deadly serious and over the top for movies that are, ultimately, which I love. I'm going to keep saying, I like these movies. I legitimately enjoy these films for what they are. They're kind of, silly movies, and these are really heavy-handed, fun radio spots. And you get a commentary on The Killer Shrews by author Jason A. Ney. It's really good. It gets into Ray Kellogg and the making of the film, and it's a really good package. So once again, the region code on these. So we'll show you the package too. Approximations of the original poster art for each, or the double feature poster art, and the back, gives you all the information. It is region A, B, and C, or zone A, B, and C for Blu-ray, which means you can play this anywhere in the world. So if you are within the sound of my voice and you're in Bolivia and you're like, I really need a great copy of The Killer Shrews, you can order this and it'll play you pop it right in the player. You get each film, as I said, on its own disc, again with a similar approximation of the poster art on it, and you get a book. And do not overlook this book. This book is, I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that? It's pretty thick. I read it. It's really interesting. It is, again, suffers a little bit from that kind of mocking, disparaging, dismissive tone, but it's got original lobby cards. It's got stills. It's got really cool imagery. I mean, look at that. Look at that thing. That's horrifying. It's scary. I think it's still kind of creepy sometimes. If you go in with the mindset that it's going to be a terrible movie to laugh at, there's plenty for you to work with there. But if you like old movies like I do, if you like old drive-in movies and you kind of want to re-experience what your ancestors experienced through some foggy windows long ago, this is a great release. I really look forward to newly restored 4K scan from 35mm archival materials. They look beautiful. There was one really, really tiny section of Killer Shrews that I noticed that looked kind of standard def, didn't look as good. My guess is that the print they had was missing that footage, and that's the best they could do. Didn't really bother me because, again, I'm so thrilled and happy and grateful to have something like this. I originally saw this on local TV that would have been running it from a beat-up 16mm print. I've seen bad copies. I've seen all the copies we had to work with this until now. There was a release years ago, a latter-day sequel. James Best was starred in a sequel called Return of the Killer Shrews many years ago, and they sold that directly online to fans, and with that came a then updated, or a then pretty clean copy of Killer Shrews, but it looked nowhere near as good as this. So throw out all your old copies, unless they're Mystery Science Theater or they have some exclusive extras. Throw out your old copies of these because these are the definitive versions. I doubt anybody else is going to try this again. Bravo to Film Masters for doing this. I cannot wait to see. They've got a robust slate of more titles like this, more public domain horror stuff. It's all fun, and I'm going to be able to toss my old copies of this and thrill to those thrilling days of yesteryear. Thank you so much, Film Masters. Available on Blu-ray now is The Killer Shrews and the Giant Gila Monster.